Okay, I guess I'm recording. All right, I want to talk about a subject that can be very confusing. No, and I won't even qualify it that way. It is very confusing. There's a lot of these little political subdivision things that enter into winemaking and classification that it just gets very confusing. So I want to kind of do a broad overview of this. And what I'm talking about is the subdivisions of wine areas. Now, I'm going to use, what shall I use? Let's use Bordeaux as an example. And let's kind of give you an idea. Again, I'm going to try and keep this high level so it gets less confusing. Now, most every winemaking, in fact, as far as I know, every winemaking country has something similar to this. They call it something different. I mean, it's local language and so forth, but it's a classification, and a lot of that is controlled by law that says, okay, if you're going to call your wine this, it has to be what you're calling it. You can't just call it, before you get to Bordeaux, you can't call it California wine if it's made in New York State. You know, it kind of makes sense. And same thing with any other country. If you're calling it anything other than American wine or French wine, then it has to come from a particular part of that country. Okay, so let's go into it. And I'm going to use Bordeaux because I like Bordeaux. It's just it's a really good region. What can I say? All right, so let's start out. If Bordeaux, of course, is a region of France. And so if you're looking at, here's France. Okay, so if the wine is made from grapes that come from different parts of the country, the only thing you can call that is made in France or French wine. That's as close as you can get to making it special on the label. All right, so, and that's by law. And let me get this out here now because I'm going to butcher the way I say this, but it's AOC, which is something like appellation, which is a form of the word to name. And okay, appellation, origine, appellation, origine de contrôle, something like that. So, appellation or named region in this case, region of origin. So Bordeaux would be your point of origin. This is where it came from, and it's named this, and its contrôle is controlled. So, yeah, that's a really bad translation, but AOC is what the country of France refers to as their wine laws. And just to throw another one out there, AVA is the one that's used in the United States. And I should have looked this up, but I think I'll look it up and put it up there somewhere. And there's a bunch of others. Spain has one, Italy has theirs, Germany has theirs, Australia has their own. So each one has their own version of it, and the legalities are a little different from one to the next. But in general, here's what they're going to say. So back to France. Okay, here it is, France. It's French wine. Okay, well, let's narrow it down. It's probably crap wine because the only thing you can say is it comes from France. Don't pay a lot for that. All right, so now we get a bottle that says, look at it, and this is not it, but it says, oh yeah, right here it says Bordeaux. Okay, well that now tells me it's not just France. It's from this little piece of France that is fairly far south, I believe, and on the west. So here's this region of France called Bordeaux. Okay, well now we're getting somewhere. It's like, oh yeah, I've heard of Bordeaux. I like Bordeaux wine. Yeah, everybody likes Bordeaux. Okay, so to do that, the law says that 100% of your grapes have to come from that region, Bordeaux in this case. All right, well, that makes sense. And there might be some other stuff that fits in there, but let's move on. Okay, now within Bordeaux, you have all these little subregions. And let's kind of jump to the west coast, I guess. And there's one called Médoc. And again, spelling up there somewhere. So, it's not only just Bordeaux, but it's in the Médoc region. That means all the grape juice, the wine in there, was grown and produced in that sub-region of Bordeaux. So again, now we're getting very specific. We've gone from this to this to this. Okay, now we get one more step down there. And now we're going to say it's not only from Médoc, but it's from Chateau, I don't know, Chateau Pierre or something. So for that to be true, then all of that wine has to be grown in the vineyards of Chateau Pierre and bottled in the estate. Now, there's a French term for that I will put up there because I can't remember how to pronounce it, but basically it means when it translates roughly as estate bottled, which means it was grown and produced on that particular estate or chateau, the vineyard, the piece of property that has the chateau someplace on it. Now, just FYI, chateau does not necessarily mean super huge, big, fancy, castle-y looking thing. A lot of them are, but not all of them. It can basically just be a country house, a nice house usually, if they're very good at making wine. So now we've gone from the country to the region to the sub-region to the individual vineyard, or in the case of Bordeaux, chateau. So the laws around that say in Bordeaux, in particular, here you get something a little different than other places. It says, okay, if you're making a red wine, all the grapes have to be, or all the wine has to come from this particular set of grapes, the 5 noble grapes or 6 noble grapes. And again, check out the Bordeaux video if you haven't seen it, and then go through that. But it's very specific. You have to have all these things in a row, otherwise you don't get the right to use all that on your label. And the label is your prestige factor. It's your calling card. So if you see Chateau XYZ on the label from Bordeaux, that means you've got, you're a very specific area. Doesn't mean it's going to be great wine, but at least you know exactly where it comes from. Now you jump over to the U.S. Let's go to Sonoma County. That's a part of California, so you can buy U.S. wine made in the U.S. You can buy California wine, so the whole state, but more typically you're going to see something that narrows it down. So it might say Sonoma. Okay, well that implies or means that it was the wine that came from the Sonoma County, if that's all it says. So Sonoma County is fairly good size, like I suppose most any county would be, but it's got its own little regions inside. So it's not just Sonoma and you're done. You can go inside that, and now you can go to Chalk Hills, or you can go to Russian River, or let's see what some other ones. Drawing a blank right now, but let's say Russian River. I like saying that one. Okay, so Russian River. That means okay, you've got California, now you've got Sonoma, now you've got Russian River, and to put that on your label officially means that. And let's go one more step. We're going to say this is going to be let's say, Cabernet Sauvignon. So when you say that, by U.S. laws, the AVA regulations say it's got to be 75% Cabernet Sauvignon if that's what you put on the label. Now that means the other 25% can be something else. It can be Merlot, it can be whatever else. Yeah, and that's common. They'll blend a little something else in there just to peak the flavor, give it a little bit more oomph, and tastes good. It's a blend. It's a little excessive from my point of view. If you're going to blend that much in, you should put it on the label. That's my take, but that's not the law. Okay, and it has to be 100% from that area. If it's Russian River, then it's got to all be grapes or wine produced from Russian River grapes. So those are some of the things to look for. Now you get back, jumping back to Europe. Most of theirs, instead of 75, is 85, and they have some other qualifications. 85% of it has to be from that region, and if you're labeling it as a single varietal, it has to be 85% or more of that varietal, and it has to be 85% or more of that vintage. So you can mix a 2013 and a 2014 together, as long as the year you put on the outside, as long as it's the majority, 85% or more. I don't know how often that happens. If you might get more than I thought, but anyway, that's their laws. So there's a lot of other laws that go into that in terms of depending on where you're at, and there are local ones that fit that country and that region. The grapes you can use, the number of, there's a key one, the number of bunches of grapes that can be on the vine. And that's to keep from having like one vine that produces like 20 bunches of grapes that just are real, they're that great, but they're not very good. They don't make very good wine. When you cut them back, prune them back to just 2, for example, you get much better quality wine. So those are other things that fit into these regulations. And again, these all are different from one country to the next, and sometimes within a country. France has a lot of versions depending on which region you're talking about. So Burgundy's laws are a little different than, or I guess significantly different than Bordeaux's laws, and the same is true for Loire or Côte de Rhône. They each have their own variations on them, but there's some common things in there. So that's what we're talking about when we run across these little symbols or letters on a bottle. If you see that, that's kind of what it means, or if you read about it, or these types of things. So reading the labels, understanding the labels is a good thing to learn and to learn more about. By reading the label, you can kind of decide if you're getting a good value or paying the right amount for that bottle or not. If it says California wine, that's all it says, or California Cabernet Sauvignon, and they're wanting a lot of money for it, I wouldn't pay it. If it's a relatively cheap wine and that's just a California red, there again, a California red, that means you don't know what you're getting. It could be a blend of anything. But anyway, that's the ones you get really cheap. Some of them are good. I mean, they're usually pretty good to drink. They're good table wines, but they're not going to be exceptional. So don't pay a lot of money for them. But you get a California Sonoma Russian River from Vintage X, or excuse me, Vineyard X, and they're likely to charge you more for that because you're paying for that specificity of where it's grown and how it's grown and who grows it. So again, give you an idea there. So look at the labels more closely from now on. Figure out as much as you can. You can also look online, pick up some more pointers on that. I'll put some of the other ones to look for over there somewhere. So like I say, I've got a short list here. You got AVA for the US, DOC is Spain, and I think they have a DOCG also. There's also AOC for France. So lots of them out there. There's Spain, Australia, Germany, they all have their own. So something to look for. Enjoy that with your wine, okay? Cheers. A lot of years, a millennium or two, and he came up with these guys that figured out if they took these wooden slats and put them together in this way and put iron rings around them and tapped everything on tight, they had this thing that we came to know as a barrel, and it was really good for hauling stuff around in, kind of like the amphora, but they didn't break as easily. I mean, you take a clay pot and you smack it with a hammer or something, and you've got a bunch of pieces. Pot shards. The reason they came up with that name, there's a lot of them around. So anyway, they found out by making these barrels out of wood that they were sturdier, they would hold more, well, not necessarily hold more, but hold it more securely. Okay, so eventually, of course, it got to the point where, let's dump our wine in there and see if we can get that across the mountainside to the other town over there and sell it. So they did, and they did. And over time, they kind of discovered that, hey, putting these barrels actually makes it taste better when it gets there than it did when it left.